dedicated her life to trying to deal with noise pollution of all kinds, landscaping equipment being one of them. And you should look it up because it's a really cool organization. But we had her speak. Mark, I think, was on the call 4 years ago. And she said, you know, New Jersey's not doing anything in this space. Why is that? And that's kind of how our group formed. So I worked with somebody from Montclair. So I will be talking about gas leaf blowers in the beginning. And David is here from Town Council, so we'll talk a little bit about what's happening in Westfield, and I know a little bit about what's happening in Cranford and Scotch Plains as well. And then Bianca is going to talk about a whole bunch of other things that you can do for sustainable landscaping, but it goes together. So you'll see that as we go through the presentation. We were planning on taking questions at the end, if that's okay. If there's something that you're dying, have to raise your hand in the middle, let us know. But we're going to try to keep it to about 40 minutes or so of presentation, and then we'll have the rest of the time for questions. Good? Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Oh, you're still? So our outline tonight is we're going to talk, what is sustainable landscaping? What does that mean? Why today's, when I say the green stamp, think of that perfectly manicured green stamp lawn. That's what I mean by that. And no leaves, a perfectly leaf-swept beds with dyed mulch, and sometimes trees that have mulch volcanoes. We've all seen those in Westfield. Why that aesthetic is not sustainable. Gas leaf blowers. How many of you heard them today? Super annoying, right? Super annoying. But it's more than annoying. So you'll hear that it's way more. If it were just annoying, we probably wouldn't be here. And then what steps we can take to have a more sustainable property, and Bianca's going to go in at length about that.
No pressure.
No pressure. So ATL, again, we are a network of volunteers. There are ATL members across the state. We have quarterly meetings. We lobby at the state level and help each other with ordinances. So most recently, I've been working with Glen Ridge that passed an ordinance. Milburn is working on one, Madison, Ridgewood, down in Margate. So across the state, working, and hopefully with Scotch Plains and Cranford, to get ordinances passed. So we collaborate together. It's about 50-odd members across 30-odd towns in 9 counties working together. And the towns that you see here have existing ordinances. Glen Ridge, Princeton, and South Orange have what we call seasonal usage ordinances. So you can use a gas leaf blower or a 2-stroke during certain seasons, so for that spring-fall cleanup, but not during other times. In the cases of Maplewood and Montclair, they have banned 2-stroke equipment year-round. So, just to ground us, what is sustainable landscaping? So we know sustainability, that should mean a lot to everybody. Yeah?
May I just ask, what do you mean by 2-stroke?
Oh, I'm sorry, sure. 2-stroke means that there's a separate compartment for oil and gas. So no, lawnmowers are generally 4-stroke, so it's combined. So you know how, like, you don't have to separately put the oil and gas in, but you're using a gas-powered leaf blower, there's a separate chamber for each. And because they're separate, they burn really dirty. Yeah, yeah. Okay?
Are they louder?
Oh, I'm going to talk about it. We'll get there. We'll get there. It's not a gas leaf blower, so. Okay. So we have limited resources, right, in our life, and we want to really be able to use them as wisely as possible. And we also don't want to bring things into our environment that are going to pollute them. So when we're talking about sustainability and sustainable landscaping, we want to really use those resources, particularly water, as sparingly as possible, because we want to conserve it. But we also want to use chemicals as little as possible. So you may have heard of integrated pest management that Bianca's going to talk about. We don't want to just constantly be fertilizing and herbicides and pesticides, only if we really need to. by doing that, we're going to protect our natural resources. Water in particular, air, soil, right? And then us living around it. So that's what we mean when we say, how can we have sustainable landscaping? And some pictures that we'll get into. Okay, so how many of you have a neighbor or have your own property that kind of looks like that, right? Yeah, that is the aesthetic. It started in probably Levittown, New York, where the idea of having a beautiful plain grass monoculture lawn with perfectly placed shrubs and no leaves and no detritus of any kind was considered beautiful. And we still have that today. My neighbor across the street, if there is a leaf on his lawn, he has somebody there blowing. The grass, so turf grass, is totally not sustainable. It's a monoculture. It doesn't nourish any pollinators. It's just, it's really not helpful for us. And it also, having these constant grass we have to mow, it creates an enormous amount of yard waste, which then is very costly for the town. It's creating CO2 emissions, so it's just not good for the environment. So that aesthetic of having this perfect green stamp lawn, leaf swept, mulch mowed, is, we need to rethink it. And if there's nothing else that you get out of this, I want you to know that I don't advocate for, let's take the gas leaf blower, rip it out, and supplant it with a battery or an electric blower. It's more than that. We have to really rethink, what does beauty mean? What is good for our landscape, good for pollinators, good for children running around in it, and think of beauty in a different way. Okay? Less grass, and you're going to hear a lot about that. Having less effort on lawns and that constant mow, blow, and go that landscapers do. Definitely less fertilizer, because that runs off and then goes into our waterways. And then looking at leaves, to me, like, for those of us that are into sustainable landscaping, we fight over leaves. Leaves are like a precious commodity. You use them in your beds, you use them in your compost bin. You don't want to just like put them in the street and let them get carted away. So really think of them as nourishing the soil. Phil, you're going to keep us honest, right? You're going to keep us honest, Phil? Yeah.
I'll try.
Okay, thank you. So why are gas leaf blowers an issue? I'm going to just sort of click through all these things here. When we think of gas leaf blowers as problematic, most of us come to the issue that it's from a quality of life. If you were home today and you were working, if you were outside, you heard them through your house, they're irritating. So like you want to have a party outside, you want to read a book, you want to relax, they definitely disturb us. We can't like even think if you're outside, like they're just really annoying. But they also are a public health issue. So, and I will go into in detail in a minute, which is probably the most important thing, that they really do cause physical bodily harm to the operator as well as people and animals in their proximity. They are an environmental issue. So when you are blowing this powerful force, and leaf blowers were designed in the 70s to clear stadiums out. So if you had a big stadium and you were between games and people left all their paper cups, plastic water bottles, detritus, they were there to quickly go in and blow it all away in between games. That was their purpose. Their purpose was not to blow leaves out of there. So when you have this force going in the environment, it's going to disrupt pollinators and lift up all the other stuff into the air that then becomes a public health issue. So environmental. And then from a social justice issue, not all, but many of our landscapers are people who might not have good health insurance. That might be the only job that they can get. And they're the ones who have to operate equipment and suffer the risks of whether it's breathing in particulate or hearing. So we're also putting the burden on them because the operator experiences greater health issues, and then the further away it goes, it lessens. Okay. Gas leak blowers are unique because, again, there's two-stroke, so they are highly polluting, unlike a four-stroke equipment. And there's alternatives to them, and we don't really need to use them, arguing. Like, you don't have to, we have to mow our lawn sometimes, we have to, use a chainsaw, you might have to edge, but we really don't have to be blowing, certainly not all the time, if we practice other practices. So that's why we think that they are really unique, because there are other two-stroke equipment. I want you to be clear on that. So there are edgers, there's weed whips, chainsaws that are two-stroke as well, but they're not used all the time, constantly. They're used more for specific purposes. And there's a picture from one of my friends with blowers, landscapers out there. Okay, so let's get into the health issues. They are a major source of air pollution. So this picture up here, the cross right there, those are hair follicles, right? They're hair. The big thing here, that's sand. So these are they're tiny. You know how big, how wide a strand of hair is, or a grain of sand. In red and blue, those are the tiny particulate, under 10 microns, that are generated, and under 2.5, that are generated from gas leak blowers. So when that oil and gas are burning and they come together, they create all kinds of volatile organic compounds or nitrous oxide compounds, and they're teeny tiny. 2.5 is considered a fine particulate, but even a 10, the 10 would be like when the blower is kicking up dirt and other fertilizer, and could be animal feces that go up into the air, and we breathe those into our lungs, and they go, when airborne. We breathe those into our lungs, and they'll go deep into our lungs, and they're known to give all kinds of health problems. So all kinds of cardiovascular problems, cancers there's sound research on it, that ingesting those are not good. And I don't know about you, but I have lots of landscapers in my neighborhood who do not wear mouth gear. They might have headgear on, sometimes they do, sometimes they do. Very rarely do I see them with face gear on. They're ingesting and breathing those in, okay? For pregnant women, it's really horrible to be ingesting these for heart attacks, so all kinds of cardiovascular as well. So that's health issue number one. Secondly, it's the noise. So the noise annoys us, but more importantly, the noise is damaging to the operator as well as to our health. And that's why the Board of Health, issued, and I see Elizabeth in the back, they issued in Westfield a statement that said gas leak blowers are problematic, like they're bad for our health. So the noise that's coming in them, and this is, if you know anything about decimals, so logarithmic, I think is the word, it gets exponent, much, much larger. So a gas leak blower, if it's perfectly calibrated, would be maybe 85, 90, but they're not. They can go up to 110 decibels when they're being operated by the operator. That is deafening. Within a couple hours, you're blowing out the hairs in your ear. That's going to cause permanent hearing loss. And I have several friends who are landscapers who are hard of hearing at this point. But it's also, even if you're not operating it, if it's 110 at the machine, if you're the next yard over, it could be 85 decibels, so that can harm your hearing. So that's a problem. The other thing that's unique about them is that they have low frequency waves. So low frequency waves, you can't hear it, that's what you feel. So if you're at home, like today I was home and I heard it go on 2 doors down, and it goes through the walls, and you just get that anxious feeling, that's the low frequency wave. And it's a real thing. It destroys our central nervous system. So it's particularly bad for young people, seniors, people who have sensory issues, pets. There's real health implications by being bombarded by those low frequency waves, and they go really, really far. And Jamie likens this kind of noise to like secondhand smoke. So even if you're not operating it, you're feeling it. And it travels really far, so low frequency waves also are super far. So this is a picture of my neighborhood. So in the center is, I have a dot of my neighbor who happens to be 800 feet away. And it's about, I don't know, 6 or 7 houses away. If there were a gas leaf blower operating on Larry's property, I would hear it. But so would anybody within 800 feet of where that landscaper is, which is why you feel like you hear them all the time. Well, you do hear them all the time because it's 800 feet in all directions, which is the equivalent of 46 acres. So you could be hearing them blocks away, depending upon how close the homes are, which is why it feels like they're always going on. Yeah, it's a problem, and then if there's multiple ones, it's even going to carry further. From an environmental perspective, so the picture on the right here is showing for a gas leaf blower and a lawnmower, thank you, all of the inputs that they require. Oil, gas, sparks, filters, they're going to drip when they're putting them in, you have to recycle, you have to throw them out. So you have all this waste attributable to using them. If you're using battery or electric, you don't have that. Do you have a battery at the end of the life? And they generally will last 3 to 5 years. That has to be recycled, yes. Yeah, that is a reality, but it's not on the property dripping and damaging water, soil, air. I did mention already, so beside the waste spillage, I mentioned the idea of leaving no leaves. So when we blow all the leaves out, that aesthetic that we've got so used to, you are denuding the soil of all of the natural nourishment that it gets from the cycle of leaves dropping. That's not good for the soil. In addition, you could be pulling up pesticides, herbicides, dog feces, other things. Those are going airborne and they're getting spread all over the place. So we really want the leaf litter to stay, to nourish the soil, but it's also a habitat for pollinators. So that's another thing that I always notice, because I don't blow my leaves, my neighbor does. I have fireflies in my yard, they do not. I have moths and butterflies, they do not. And then finally, when you're using a powerful blower, it's also going to spread rusts and molds. Almost done. So alternative equipment is available. We do have batteries powered, electric powered equipment that's available. Is it as fine as the top-notch battery packed, like if you were working on a golf course and you had to like blow everything? No. Do you need, so I go back to, we're not saying supplant two-stroke with battery. We're saying leave the leaves. You're going to hear about mulch mowing. Get used to a different aesthetic, and then if you do need to do some cleaning up, particularly on hardscape, your driveway, your walkway, your patio, an electric will totally do the job. There's lots of companies that offer them. Home Depot, I think, has agreed that they're going to go fully to electric now. They're not going to sell them anymore. And there's at least, I know Scapabilities, and then there's one other landscaper in town that offers electric services. And it's a matter of asking your landscapers to do that. So they are out there to do it. And I'll end with, don't forget a rake, because you can always rake your leaves too.
Okay. So I'll talk about some additional steps, some other steps that you can take to make your garden, your landscaping a little bit more sustainable. And just to remind us, it is about using resources, promoting biodiversity, and reducing waste. And I'll do that in kind of 2 sections. I'll talk about what we garden, because that has an impact on how sustainable we are, and how we garden, meaning what practices, what actions, how do we manage our landscape. Many of you may have heard this, if not here for the first time. This is an excellent mantra, I think, for making your garden more sustainable. Choose the right plant for the right place. What does that mean? It means know your garden. the fancy word is site analysis. Understand your topography. What's the lay of the land? Where is it high? Where is it low? Where does the water flow? What soil do you have? Do you have rich soil full of decomposed organic matter? Do you have poor gravelly soil? Where is it sunny? Where is it shady? Do you have existing vegetation that causes a lot of shade? And then lastly, are there any obstructions? Do you have anything underground, anything above ground? Are we okay?
Is your mic on?
I think I pressed the on button. Yeah? Okay. Overhead wires or utilities in the soil. Don't plant there either. Then know the plants. Be careful, not be careful. There are several categories on how to choose the plants. We usually go by the top 4, I'd say. We all love beautiful colors in the bloom or in the leaves. Sometimes we appreciate them for their fruit. We know what shape the plants take, how tall, how wide they grow. We tend to know if they're annuals or biannuals, perennials. But what do we know about the behavior? How do they live with other plants in union? Are they aggressive spreaders? Do they reseed a lot? All of those, knowing that those things, lastly, sorry, the wildlife aspect, whom do they support? And all of that can be part of your plant selection and make your garden that much more sustainable. But let's not forget us, right? This is ultimately also for us. So what do you want to get out of your plants? Do you want them to create some shade for you? Do you want them to create a screening towards your neighbor or towards a section in your backyard that you don't want to see? Do you have erosion? Do you want to hold soil in place? Zooming in a little bit more on the plant selection, there are 4 rules of thumb, 4 categories. Choose 70% native plants. With that, you really support the wildlife in your garden, up 70% of the biomass. And then the rest, just don't choose invasives. That would be the second one. Staying with the first, the top bar there, well-behaved ornamentals. So an ornamental sage isn't going to do anything. It's not going to leave your backyard. It's not going to invade the natural areas. So that is a perfectly fine plant. You can't live without your peonies. Nothing wrong with that either. But then there are plants that have escaped, like the wisterias, like the Japanese knotweed. And they're still available for sale. It is mind-boggling. We can still buy cavalry pear in the nurseries, barberries, all of those. I could show you in Brightwood Park, I could show you in Tamaqua, they've escaped our gardens. It's really bad, so don't plant those. When I say watch out, I'm talking about the plants that tend to take over your garden. You want to be mindful if you really want to choose the Canadian goldenrod and put that in your garden. You're going to have all Canadian goldenrod. So understand how they, I'm going back to behavior and what plant partners the plants grow together with to keep each other in check. And lastly, I'm going to jump to the next slide. Think of layers. This is what I mean. This graphic is taken from this wonderful book that I recommend everybody should read. Think of layers. I think when we all think of gardens traditionally, we go for structure, for beautiful accents, for lots of color. But it is the ground layer at the bottom that is just shown in grass here. But it really means a whole lot more. It is this table that goes with this graphic in the book. It means that you can have calyxes, but also broadleaf and flowering plants in this ground cover. 50% of this functional layer should be your plantings in your garden, your grass, and that's how in your planting areas. That's how you suppress the weeds. That's how you support wildlife, critters on all levels, literally, because birds, will be up high, but you will have larvae of all kinds of butterflies living in the ground layer. This is happens to be my garden, and I hope that you can see the different layers. There's this ground layer. It does flower. The golden ragwort is in full bloom. The white azaleas. This was an area under trees where we had lawn, and the lawn wasn't doing well. So, and we had an irrigation system. It was just too shady and just the watering didn't do enough. So we ripped out the lawn, we transplanted the azaleas, and I introduced mostly native plants. Yes, I know hosta is not, but that was a legacy plant that we had in the garden. And for budget reasons, I kept it. It's a non-native plant, but it's also not escaping. So I have a mixed planting, and I think I find it pleasing, beautiful. I have flowers throughout the different seasons, and the structure is provided by the shrubs. How I'm going to wrap up. This is another example, speaking of ground layers, right? They don't have to be boring. This was at a client's house. It was a huge bed of mulch, and I was able to convince the client to stop replenishing the mulch every year and instead to plant a green carpet. It is all low. This is from spring, summer to fall. And you see how in the spring, this is very diverse with the colors and the flowers. This is still diverse. It's all green, but the textures give still an interesting aspect. And then I was a little too late for the fall picture, so the Cupra villosa has passed its prime flower, but you see that there's a fall color aspect as well. This talk wouldn't be complete if I didn't spoke about one bug. Today I'm choosing the Luna moth. This is a butterfly that I found in our garden the year after we had ripped out the lawn and introduced all those plants. And I'd never seen that huge moth. It's one of the biggest ones in New Jersey. It's, I think it belongs to the silk moth family. And when I saw it, and my daughter even knew about it and told me, oh, mommy, they don't feed. They don't have a mouth when they are born, when they are adults, because all the feeding happens when they are caterpillars. And I wanted to learn more about the life cycle. Also, why was it on my back porch? Dead, not alive. This is not my picture, unfortunately. So I did some research, and in the Mid-Atlantic, our beloved sweet gum, right? The gumballs that probably all of you have in your backyard. If you have a sweet gum tree, you are hosting a host plant, so to speak, for this Luna moth. The caterpillars climb up in the spring. They feed exclusively on the leaves. That is in the Mid-Atlantic. They also have other host trees in other areas. You see the cocoon that holds the pupae, which is this picture here, up in the leaves, and then they fall down into the leaf litter. So if you come into the leaves under the trees, so if you come around and mow, if you come around and blow your leaves under your trees, you're blowing them away. If there is lawn, they actually cannot burrow into the soil, because if they are not protected by the cocoon, this kind of bores just ever so slightly in the soil. That can't happen if you have lawn under your trees. In the spring, the moth ecloses, starts flying mates, and the life cycle starts over again. So there are lots of reasons why choosing different plants or choosing your plantings wisely makes a lot of sense. So this happens to be on my front yard. Over the years, we've been expanding this bed. The trees that you saw earlier with the yellow and white flowers are kind of in the backyard there. So this is, these are also sweet gums, so I have 7 of them, lots of gumballs, as you can see. But I appreciate the tree now all the more. And we just clean the gumballs off the walkways. The front walk along the street, off our driveway, and the front walk so that we don't trip. This has not harmed our lawn. This is a practice that we've now done over 4 years. It's about time that we clean the gumballs off. And my husband and I do use the rusty rake. We don't own a leaf blower. And sometimes we get our kids to help us, so that's a method. Heather Holm has caused this soft landing, what I was just describing. She's been promoting for all kinds of trees. So up at the top, you see this little piece of paper saying there are oaks, willows, cherries, pines, and poplars in the northeast that support all kinds of butterflies and moths. They all follow a similar life cycle that I described about the Luna moth, and they need that duff layer, the layer of leaves underneath the trees. She's also hinting at what you shouldn't be doing, what we touched upon, don't mow, don't put landscape fabric down. That doesn't work anyway, because as the landscape fabric collects all kinds of organic debris, leaves, you can put your mulch on top, all of that as it decomposes becomes perfect growing medium for any weeds. So you can just skip the landscape fabric. Dr. Talamy has written a book just about the benefits of oaks. It may be a little bit nerdy. I found it fascinating, and it describes all the critters that depend on oaks. So there are, without the oaks in the mid-Atlantic or in the Northeast, we are really in trouble. And then lastly, he has really, those two authors together have really promoted the idea of keystone species. So there are the trees that I mentioned up there. This pamphlet that you can find online also talks about other other woodies, meaning shrubs, and then herbaceous plants that all support pollinators, meaning they provide nectar and pollen, and for lots of them. But the butterflies, or rather the caterpillars, need the host plants to feed on. Butterflies or caterpillars are unique in the sense that they usually are specialists. They can only eat the leaves of one species. Probably all familiar with the monarch butterfly. If you don't have milkweed, then the monarch butterfly caterpillars don't have anything to eat. They cannot they cannot feed on any other plant. So those are keystone species. Keystone species support a large number of either caterpillars or bees, specialist bees. So now I'm transitioning to the how, and I want to show you a collection of books, brochures, pamphlets that I find really useful that talk about the design aspects that I touched upon, the plant selection, the plant behavior, how you should arrange them, but then also practices. Really important are kind of the horticultural aspects on how to do proper lawn care. I find this, I think it's a 3-page document from Rutgers, really helpful. It's basic, and yet it explains how important the soil is. So mulch mowing, Lois mentioned it earlier, that's something that we practice in the fall in our garden, actually all year long. When we mow in the spring and in the summer, we just leave the clippings. In the fall, we just mow over our leaves that are not under trees and just leave those fine leaves. They've all disappeared by now. So this is how we recycle the nutrients right away, and I don't need to apply a lot of fertilizer. That's how I keep the pH rather stable. I don't have to apply as much lime. Tree care is also something that's really important and really dear to my heart. Please educate yourselves on how to properly prune a tree. Please don't weed whack at the bottom of the tree and damage the bark. That is a way for pathogens in. I'll get to that point in a minute in a different graphic. The roots, if you have roots in your grass and you're trying to, and you have to mow under them and you damage the roots over and over and over again. It's like, I don't know, picking a spot on your skin. You're weakening your immune system and you're creating perfect paths in for pathogens. That works the same way for trees. So these are all very helpful publications that I find. And I want to highlight 2 of them. This is a resource online that you can download. This is a book that came out recently based on Dr. Talamy's writings. And these are just kind of their indices. So if you're walking out of here and you're not quite clear where to start, what to do, these are 2 great, just 1-pagers to have as an overview with lots of actions detailed in each guide. Because I like the quotes of either one of both of these. This one talked about nature-based gardening. What does that mean? Well, it just means like working with nature and understanding how nature works, and looking at the cycle of nutrients, looking at the water cycle. That's exactly what we're trying to promote here. The best practices, I just talked about that briefly. Know how to properly take care of your lawn. Understand what your lawn needs so that you have beautiful lawn. Only in the areas where you need it. Doesn't need to be under a tree. This is a concept. This is a plan of my garden, but this is not my idea. I was at Glenstone Museum. This is a fabulous place that I can recommend, not highly enough. I cannot recommend highly enough for everybody who's in the DC area to go visit. It's just, and it's Maryland, just outside of DC. It's a huge, it's a museum space, but also an organically maintained landscape. It's hundreds of acres. So how do they do it? And they said, well, we just divide our property into management zones because there are certain areas that we want to look perfect all the time, that we spend 100% of our time and they need to be weed-free. Those are the areas that are highly visible. In my case, I spend a lot of time checking out the weeds, along the sidewalk so that the neighbors don't get annoyed. When I walk my front door, I don't want to see weeds all the time, so this is what I keep weed-free, and same at the back door. Then the next zone down, that is kind of secondary, not as visible, I don't walk by it as much as kind of the back of the beds. I don't spend as much time, I monitor, but I don't spend so much time maintaining it. And then the back areas, I just keep an eye on, and I weed 2 to 4 times a year, depending on how bad it is, but it's getting less and less and less as I keep my ground covered all the time. So this concept of green mulch is really working, I can tell you from experience. The client's property that I showed you with a picture of the sequence of 3 pictures, there was stilt grass there. The planting is in place now, it's 2nd year. I was done within half an hour weeding the stilt grass out of there, and it's probably as big as this room. So really easy, not a problem. This definitely works and helps you find priorities of where you want to spend most of your time. Okay, of course, not everything is hunky-dory all the time. So you have sick plants, pests move in, and talking about this spiral in detail would take a whole hour in itself. So I'm not gonna ask you to read it. I'm actually gonna click it away. But this is trying to show is showing the complexity of all of this. I've tried to boil down in this little math equation. So if you don't plant a mathematical equation, if you choose plants that are not right for the place, you're kind of predisposing them to not do well. The reverse is true too. If you match the plant to your site, you're setting yourself up for success. Then stresses can happen. So last fall we had a drought, so that certainly put a lot of stress on our trees, on our shrubs. And then the immune system is weakened for the trees, and then pests and pathogens can move in and start a spiral of disease, decline, and death for plants. So making sure that your plants are happy and healthy by choosing the right ones for your site in the first place is the easiest way to make sure that you have little disease happening, little disease pressure. These are Lois concentrated on the gas leaf blowers. I'm going to concentrate on point out the automatic irrigation systems and tools that we use. These systems are often set up to irrigate too frequently and for too short of time. And all that does is put water on the leaves and create perfect growing conditions for all kinds of fungal diseases. And then you come with a leaf blower and you blow, or your landscaper, and blows around, and then you're just spreading and spreading and spreading it. The short watering results in little water actually getting into the top surface of the means that only water gets in the top surface of the soil. Therefore, the roots stay shallow, and if there is a really hot day or if there's a really windy day, you lose the moisture really quickly and the plants become stressed. Dirty tools. If you work on a plant that has a disease and you trim it or you prune it, you cut it, and then you walk to the next plant with the same shear, with the same pruner, you're carrying the pathogens from one plant to the next. I have to admit that that's something that I didn't practice before very much, but I was at a Rutgers presentation, and the extension officer made it pretty clear that this is the biggest spreader of disease, so to speak. So I can only urge you to think about, if you get a plant from a friend, right? You're not even thinking about tools. If you get a plant from a friend, make sure that the roots are really washed off so that you don't bring anything that might be in their soil into your garden. It is really how we transport the plants and how we, what tools we use to work around the plants, how we affect the health. Weeds. What are weeds? Well, they're plants growing in a place where we don't want them. So I'm not talking about the invasives. I'm not trying to get you excited about knotweed and mugwort, although you could eat those. So if they grow in a place where you can be sure that it's safe, meaning you know that no Roundup was sprayed in the last couple of years, that it's not frequented by dogs, that, mark the territory, then you can totally eat mugwort. It is delicious. At Duke Farms, Lois and I participated in a workshop that was about foraging, so the weeds can be eaten, in even the particularly nauseous ones. But how about these weeds? How about these weeds? Right? I've heard people say that they don't like violets because they take over their lawn. They happen to be the host plant for the, skipper butterfly. So without those, you don't have the skipper butterfly. So do you really need to remove them everywhere? Maybe not in your lawn, okay, but can they be a ground cover? Can they be a green mulch in your planting bed? How about the fleabane? It is a small aster, and it just fills in. So I'd rather see a fleabane than another weed that doesn't give me that doesn't offer the flowers for me to appreciate, but also happens to be a pollen and nectar source for an pollinator, for an insect coming by. Lois mentioned it earlier, the integrated pest management. Familiarize yourself, understand, identify, why is my plant sick? What is this pest? What is this weed? So identify it. There are apps. I really like PlantNet. I know plenty of friends who use iNaturalist. This bugguide.net shows you any critter under the sun. Is maybe a little exaggerated, but it's really easy by shape and size to identify what you have. And once you know what you have, you can then research more on how to go about it, if it's really necessary to be concerned. And if all fails, the Master Gardener's Helpline is a great resource too. So once you've identified, you can decide if you need to do something about it. Is it an annual weed? Oh, well, then you just have to cut off the seed head, right, before they really mature. You can leave the plant. The plant is going to decay anyway when the fall comes, and you've saved yourself a whole lot of work, and you have saved yourself more trouble by digging up the plant and exposing soil and exposing more weed seeds that are in the soil, and you're promoting the growth of additional weeds. But keep an eye on it as you remove it, because there might be more coming, but maybe not. Decide for yourself when you have to really go big, when you really have to start an intervention. And if you decide that you need to really control, you really need to spray, that's the only way out, maybe contacting a lawn company that specializes in organic care is a good alternative. Calling an arborist that is ISA certified, who really knows what he's doing, or she, to understand the larger issues that might be the problem that are showing, that are causing the problem. Understand the larger context of why your tree is having problems. 2 more slides and I'm done, and we can take questions. I can't finish this presentation without talking about stormwater and green infrastructure. This is a great brochure, also available online on the Rutgers Water Resource page, that shows you in enough detail to understand the benefits of or how rain barrels function. This is the rain garden that we have in Tamacos Park. Porous pavement, in this case asphalt, is a great idea to keep the stormwater that runs off of the impervious surfaces that you have on your property on your site. Because I see stormwater rather as a resource that helps hydrate my soil, that allows me to actually grow plants that I wouldn't be able to grow otherwise because I'm adding that little bit of moisture into my soil. And I'm also doing a service to the community. I am delaying the peak offlow, and I'm delaying the peak flow within the stormwater sewer system. And if you want to move beyond your property and do something right along the curb, right by your house, you can adopt a drain. Why? Because if you keep the drain clean, neither the leaves or grass clippings nor the trash, the salt's a little bit harder, but certainly the dog poop, if that gets picked up and prevented from going down the drain, it will not end up in the streams. Because believe it or not, the pipes, the drains go in pipes that kind of disappear in the street. But I could show you, if we took a walk into Marcus Park, where the pipes actually discharge all the water into the natural streams that we have in Westfield. And that happens in all towns across the United States. So, in summary, what you do in your garden matters. I hope that we showed you some management choices and alternatives that you can make. If you're overwhelmed now, maybe there's one thing that really stuck with you. Start small, it's okay. And then, you go from there. And if you help spread the word, if you talk to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family about what you heard today, that would be great and help us all. Thank you.
So we're going to take questions, and then we also have a giveaway, so we will do that too. But questions are going to, yeah.
The gas powered leaf blowers, the ordinances and so on, do they tend to cover also the machinery that they use for spraying pesticides like mosquito sprayers?
That's a good question. So most of the new ordinances coming out would also apply to pesticides, with the exception of like county mosquito control, like if they're spraying for Zika. It is there's a couple state bills that are working their way through, and we have asked that it would apply to them as well. And I will say that if, and that was a good segue into our giveaway today. So in the back, you might see a bucket. Green Team is going to be copying, thanks to Cranford, it's called a bucket of doom. And it is a safe way for you to do mosquito control in your yard using a mosquito junk called UTI. When you see Mosquito Joe or Mosquito Shield and they're using gas leak blowers and they're spraying, well, it's spraying everywhere, and they're indiscriminate. They're going to kill pollinators as well as mosquitoes. It doesn't last very long. It's about 10% effective. So yeah, we're trying to get it to apply to them. And also to roofers, contractors, so it would broadly apply.
I was going to ask
Okay.
you the.
No, go ahead. That's okay. Go ahead.
We have situations as the climate changes, it's gotten a little more hotter in the summer. It impacts the trees